Imagine if Hitler had won World War II. How different would our world be today? And what would our daily life look like? It may sound like a fictional story, but it could have actually happened. In the early 1940s, the entire world was engulfed in war. Nazi Germany had captured Poland and France and was constantly bombing Britain. Hitler's army had advanced deep into the Soviet Union, and at the same time, his ally Japan had taken control over parts of Asia and the Pacific. The world was at a turning point, millions were dying, and the war had spread across Europe, Asia, and Africa. By 1941, Germany had taken over most of Europe, Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, and Italy was fighting in North Africa. The Allies, America, the UK, and the Soviet Union, were under extreme pressure, and it felt like the world was heading into never-ending darkness. But then, things began to change. In 1942, after a brutal battle, the Soviet Union pushed back the German forces at Stalingrad. In North Africa, the Allies stopped the German and Italian advance, and in the Pacific, the US destroyed Japan's navy in the Battle of Midway. In 1944, Allied forces landed in Normandy and began freeing Western Europe, while the Soviets advanced from the east. By 1945, Germany was surrounded. Hitler committed suicide in April, and by May, Berlin had fallen. A few months later, the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan surrendered. This marked the defeat of the Axis powers, including Germany. But if Hitler and the Axis had won, the world would be divided into two massive empires: the Nazi Empire controlling Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, and the Japanese Empire ruling Asia and the Pacific, including China, Southeast Asia, and parts of Australia. Britain, France, Poland, and the Netherlands would be under Nazi control, and America would be isolated, possibly ruled by pro-Hitler leaders. Daily life would be completely different. Nazi ideology would dominate everything. What you could read, watch, say, your job, and where you could live, all decided by the regime. There would be no free press, no free elections, and no internet like today. Only government-approved news would be shown, and books by religious scholars, black writers, or anti-Nazi authors would be banned. Schools would only teach Nazi ideology, and history would be rewritten to portray Hitler as a hero. The Holocaust might never have stopped. Same way, if we talk about the economy, there would be neither a free market nor anyone could do business. In Nazi Germany, all major industries were under government control. Private companies could only operate if their objectives aligned with Nazi objectives, and most factories were set up to produce weapons, especially after 1939. So, if Hitler had won, factories would not have produced phones, cars, or clothes for ordinary people. Instead, they would have only made weapons, tanks, and other war equipment. Big tech companies like Google or Apple would never have existed because the government would have kept all kinds of technology under its control to use it for its own purposes. The most terrifying aspect of this future was that diversity would have vanished from the world because there would have been no different cultures, religions, or traditions. The Nazis believed that only one race had the right to live. If they had remained in power, many communities would have been completely wiped out. Religions like Judaism, Islam, and even some Christian sects would have been banned. Cities that were hubs of culture and traditions would have appeared silent, boring, and lifeless. Even people's way of speaking would have changed. The German language would have become the national language of all of Europe and even parts of America. Any music, food, fashion, or art that went against Nazi ideology would have been banned. Science might have progressed, but without any ethics. The Nazis were infamous for conducting dangerous experiments on humans. If they had stayed in power, these brutal experiments would have become very common. Medical research would not have been conducted to help people or cure diseases, but rather to control the population or create a perfect human. And this is not just hypothetical. The Nazis actually did such things. In an experiment called Action T4, they not only sterilized thousands of people, but also killed them. In their concentration camps, the Nazis conducted horrific medical experiments on humans, such as changing eye color, increasing pain tolerance, and forcibly experimenting on twins. If Hitler had won, such experiments would have become the norm in science. The Nazis did not value space or the environment much, unless these things helped them win the war. The biggest example of this is that they built the V-2 rocket, the world's first missile, which was not for space exploration, but to destroy London. It was built by a man named Wernher von Braun, who later built space rockets for America. Under Nazi rule, people would have lived in constant fear. The government would have monitored everything. Neighbors would spy on each other, and if you said something wrong, you could end up in jail. Again, this is not an assumption. Hitler had created a secret police called the Gestapo, which arrested anyone suspected of being against Hitler. German people were encouraged to report their friends, co-workers, and even family members. There were even cases where children reported their parents for speaking against the Nazis. Public punishments were given to intimidate and control people. Everyone had to display their loyalty, even if it was not genuine. You might be wondering if all this was really possible. The answer is yes. There were several moments in World War II when the Allies were losing. For example, if Hitler had attacked Britain a little earlier, or if America had not joined the war, or if Germany had captured Moscow, today's world map would have been completely different. If Hitler had won World War II, the world would have been a very cold and dark place. Technology would have been used only to control people, and religions and cultures would have been severely damaged. Thinking like this makes us realize that the things we take for granted today, freedom of speech, democracy, ethical science, or the right of any human to live, no matter their background, race, or beliefs, none of these things would have existed. So, the lesson is very clear. Freedom and peace are never guaranteed, and history can repeat itself if we don't remain vigilant. Hitler did not win this war, but we must keep asking ourselves, what if he had won? Because only by remembering the past can we protect the future. Today, the world is once again at a very fragile turning point. The egos of a few powerful people could push the world into the flames of war. This is a fire that does not consume those rich and powerful people. It only burns ordinary people like you and me. It seems like we humans have learned nothing from the past, and we are once again heading toward a major war. This time, this great war could lead to the complete destruction of humanity. If you like the video, share it with others and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video with another interesting topic. Take care.